Ride the Pink Horse from 1947 was a unique crime film in which a mysterious stranger arrives at a sleepy New Mexican town in order to bring blackmail and revenge against a rich crime lord. This was an unusual film, but very enjoyable. It wasn't at all what I expected, including the ending, but I still thought it was a great film, and thanks to my friend Robert for the recommendation for this film. Well, the film credits roll with some pleasant guitar music, and soon enough, we see a Greyhound bus that has made its way to a small New Mexican border town of San Pablo. Robert Montgomery's character steps from the bus. He's Lucky Gagan, and he steps into this bus station where he takes a seat and pockets a gun from his briefcase. So we establish pretty early on that he's a tough guy. And he leaves a mysterious paper in a locker and walks over to get some 5-cent mint gum. I love it. 5-cent gum. But he uses the gum in order to leave a locker key kind of stuck behind a map, MacGyver style, and then leaves. He goes to speak to some local women in order to find lodging, and one of them, the character Pila, is played by actress Wanda Hendricks, offers to help him find the local hotel. Now, she's an interesting character with these large eyes just staring at him. She has a strange fascination with the guy, but Lucky, he's kind of a jerk to her, and he's just all about his business. He goes to the hotel, but before he goes in, she gives him a small doll.
No, I'm not buying any souvenirs.
No, you don't buy it. You keep it. It protects you.
So Lucky steps into this very bustling, busy hotel and finds out there's no rooms available. But what we find out is that he's more interested in finding a guy named Frank Hugo. He goes to the room of this guy, room 315, and has a confrontation with his butler character, played here by Richard Gaines, who I caught recently in the crime film Double Indemnity. Lucky decides he's just going to wait around for this Frank character to return, and when the butler gets antsy and is about to make a call, Lucky slugs him.
Then get out!
Well, the character Marjorie shows up, played by the lovely actress Andrea King, and politely tries to figure out who he is. But when a call arrives saying that Frank won't be back that day, Lucky leaves. Now in the lobby, he's unexpectedly greeted by this guy who knows his name and knows who he is. It's this character named Retz. It's played by actor Art Smith, who I caught recently in the Bogart film In a Lonely Place. Now Retz is onto his schemes, where he came from, and knows all about him, and offers him lunch. Now Lucky, completely suspicious of this guy, goes along, has lunch with him, and it's here that we find out that Retz is a federal agent who has been tailing the same Frank Hugo guy, and he'd like to know what Lucky has planned to do. Lucky's not dealing with the feds, and he leaves. Now Lucky is still unable to get a room at the hotel, so he heads into town, visits some of the native local folks, and there's this great scene as he arrives in town and gets that quiet assessment by the locals. Well, since he only has a large bill, the bartender can't break it, but this big burly local, Pancho, suggests that Lucky just buy drinks for everyone, and Lucky goes for it. And Pancho was played here by actor Thomas Gomez, who was also in Key Largo. It's another Bogart Bacall film I need to review on the channel soon. Anyhow, Lucky gets good and plastered, everyone's laughing and having a great time, and he opens up a little bit, becomes a little more friendly and chummy with Pancho. And Pancho gives him a place to sleep in his modest dwelling, and even though Pancho seems to live in abject poverty and drinks a lot, he appreciates having an amigo, and he's a really good friend to this Lucky guy. He's got a good attitude, and his meager income comes from running a carousel for some of the local kids. Well, Pila shows up that night, though, and asks Pancho if he can turn on the carousel so she can have a ride. Lucky here tells her that she should ride the Pink Horse, hence where the title of the film comes from, I guess. And Lucky's about to go to sleep when that character Retz shows up again, or Uncle Sam, as Lucky calls him, because he's still distrustful of this Fed. But Retz is there to give him some warnings. And he's kind of shadowing him to see what's going on and to see what play Lucky will make. So the next day, Lucky is up. He's getting cleaned up and shaved when Pila shows up again. And honestly, Lucky is just a jerk to her, putting her down and insulting her outfit and her hair. but she seems fascinated with him.
Why do you have to look like that?
Like what?
Like you come out of a sideshow.
Back at the hotel, Lucky finally meets with this character, Frank Hugo. He's this large, bald crime lord, and he's got this peculiar hearing device in that, to me, sort of resembled like a Bluetooth earpiece, but it's actually a hearing aid. But in any case, Lucky tells him that he has a canceled check that would tie Hugo to crimes of war profiteering, but he'll sell it to him for a price. So he's got this blackmail scheme going on. And Lucky also wants to get this guy back, because apparently he also had his best friend killed for attempting to blackmail him. So Hugo agrees to this and says he'll get the money for him and that they can meet later.
I don't even trust my mother. And I guess a blackmailer can't be too careful. Must be an exciting way to make a living. I'll have to try it sometime.
Well, Retz finds Pila and talks with her. She seems to know Lucky is in trouble. And when Lucky shows up to talk to the two of them, there's a terse exchange with him and Retz. He just does not trust this guy. Retz knows something is going on, though, but Lucky isn't cooperating. He then talks with Pila and continues to be a jerk, basically. She's all prettied up for him, and he says condescending things like, "What happened to you?" But he's not a total jerk, and he does take her to lunch. And as it seems like she can't read the menu, he orders for both of them, including these cool fruit cocktails served on ice. It's pretty weird. I have to admit, being distracted at this point. Is the fruit served on just plain crushed ice? Or is it like a fruity flavored ice, like a slushy? Or am I just overanalyzing this? In any case, Marjorie shows up to talk to him about a scheme to get the money from Frank. And she has other ideas that she shares that would help him get even more money. He dismisses it, but agrees to talk to her later. And then he finishes his lunch with Pila. Soon the local parade takes place, and it's actually pretty cool looking. But man, that giant puppet thing was terrifying. Anyhow, Lucky goes to meet with Frank. And since he's still busy eating and the money isn't available yet, he instead goes dancing with Marjorie. Now she leads him on to think that she's secretly on his side, tells him that there's no money actually coming, then lures him outside where, when you start to think that maybe she's got a thing for this guy, nope, he gets ambushed and attacked while she watches and smiles. So she slips back inside, but who should she meet but Retz, who is there anticipating that something fishy has just taken place, and he discovers the attackers on the ground outside, but Lucky is gone. Now Retz has a couple brisk words with Frank Hugo, and then he leaves. Now Frank doesn't seem all that bothered, though, and he just continues eating his dinner. Retz calls some cops that arrive, and they find the beaten-up thugs on the ground, and they all go off looking for Lucky. But alas, it's Pila who finds him, nearly dead, with a knife in his back. And she helps bandage him up and brings him to see Pancho, who seems understanding and can relate, you know. When you're young, everyone sticks you with a knife, you know, that type of thing. And of course, being a crime film, they do plenty of the try to heal it with booze technique, because we all know that booze grants health power-ups and healing abilities and stuff like that in movies. They patch him up, and Pila cares for the poor guy, but some thugs come looking around trying to find him. And Pila hides with Lucky on the carousel while these thugs go to question Pancho. And when he denies everything, they beat the poor guy up. It's kind of an uncomfortable scene, the poor guy, because you see the kids on the carousel watching as poor old Pancho gets beaten up. They bring poor Lucky to a bar to try to blend him in to hide, but he's not doing well, and he clearly needs some sleep, maybe an antibiotic. Another thug comes creeping in, but Pila bops him on the head with a bottle of booze, and they slip away again. Now, meanwhile, the parade continues outside. We kind of hear it through most of these scenes. Poor Lucky doesn't look good at all, and she hides him on a bus and goes to look for the ticket seller. But Lucky, he's not sleeping at all, and even in his weak and delirious state, he staggers to the hotel to go and have a final confrontation with Frank Hagen. He arrives at his room, and they bring him in, and with just about 10 minutes left in the film, I'll let you catch the exciting conclusion for yourself. So, some quick closing thoughts. Ride the Pink Horse was produced by Universal and was directed by the star, Robert Montgomery, and was based on a novel by Dorothy Hughes. Robert Montgomery also directed Lady in the Lake. It was another crime film that I reviewed recently, and it's a great film, too. Robert Montgomery plays the tough guy really well here. He's an unyielding character who honestly doesn't really go through any sort of character redemption arc or anything to turn him soft, the love of a woman or anything like that. Instead, he's just this bitter, jaded war veteran with just a touch of PTSD, which added to the depth of his character. Honestly, he's not very likable in this film, but we're curious enough to see his character's story unfold, to see if he's going to get that revenge that he seems so driven to get. Wanda Hendricks added a nice and unusual element with the character Pila. And here's the thing, she's not necessarily very gorgeous or glamorous in this film, and that leaves us kind of guessing about where her relationship with the character Lucky is going. I mean, is her character just interested in him with a girlish fascination and curiosity? And Lucky just seems dismissive of her throughout most of the film, even frequently insulting her. So it's a puzzling relationship, but watch the film for yourself and check out that unusual relationship between the two, which is different from anything I've seen. By the way, maybe it's just me, but Wanda Hendricks here, in a way, resembled Dawn Wells or Mary Ann from Gilligan's Island, but maybe it's just me. And I was interested to read some of her backstory as an actress, that she was briefly married to World War II hero turned actor Audie Murphy in 1949, and she co-starred with him a year later in one of his westerns, Sierra. But their marriage had some serious issues, and that Audie wanted her to give up her career, and he would also suffer from flashbacks to his wartime experiences and would often hold her at gunpoint during violent episodes. She left him after only 7 months and divorced him on grounds of mental cruelty. Anyhow, one of the things I like to make mention of is good supporting acting roles. And again, I really like seeing Art Smith, who did a great job as the cool, patient federal agent, the one who was just biding his time and following along to see what play that the character Lucky would make. Art Smith was also great in the film In a Lonely Place, where he was a loyal friend of Bogart's very abusive character in that film. Thomas Gomez was also excellent as Pancho, the big, bearded, grizzly guy with the missing teeth. He almost looks like he escaped from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. And I love big, expressive, colorful characters like this, who just have so much of a living presence in a film. And to his credit, Thomas Gomez was actually nominated for an Oscar for his role in this movie. Now, although the story was set in a New Mexico border town, it was actually filmed in northern New Mexico. And as my 3 fans know, I do love location footage when it appears in an old film. It kind of gives us that window into the past. And what was great about this film was seeing all of the scenes at the La Fonda Hotel in New Mexico. I looked at some of the street views, and I even went to the La Fonda website, and it's interesting, but this hotel and a lot of the interior footage looks much the same as in the film, 70 years later. I have some of the links in the description below. It's pretty cool. Now, just a final thought before I wrap up the review. Just something I was considering, but maybe they didn't require high school Spanish back in the 1940s, but I can't help but think that this really would have helped out Robert Montgomery's character in this film if he knew just a few basic Spanish phrases. I mean, I'm no Spanish expert, and I've already forgotten a vast amount of my own high school Spanish, but just some little things like necesito un hotel or un vaso grande de whiskey could have really helped him out a lot. Or heck, even estoy apunalado might have helped the poor guy when he got stabbed in the back. But hey, minor observation. Okay, time to move on from Robert Montgomery films, although I'm adding John Ford's film They Were Expendable to my list to view in the future, as this was one of Robert Montgomery's early films. I'll get to that later, but I do have to move on to different things. Ride the Pink Horse was an interesting, unusual crime film, and I really enjoyed it. It's got great acting, it's got some great location footage, and it's a different style of crime story than I was expecting. It's definitely one worth checking out.